Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, helping you to find jargon-free information before choosing a professional to help solve your problems and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stuart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And on this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to say that we have family law attorney Anita M. Ventrelli, a senior partner of Schiller DuCanto and Fleck LLP, and she's calling in all the way from Chicago, Illinois. Now, Anita, who is considered to be a leader in the area of family law, will be talking to you today about a very interesting topic. See, Anita's been in touch with us and asked if she could come and speak about the topic of disability and divorce. Now, we've never had that topic before, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what Anita has to share with us. So if you are one of the many people in the Chicago, Illinois area, and you're out there looking for jargon-free information to solve your divorce-related problems, then you might want to just go ahead and take a break, log out of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or anything else you happen to be doing which may cause a distraction. And you may even want to grab a notepad and pen and get ready to take some copious notes as we listen in to what Anita has to share with us today. So with that said, let's not keep her waiting any longer. Welcome to the show, Anita.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
You are so welcome, Anita. So let's just jump feet first in. It goes without saying that anything you share with us today, Anita, is not legal advice or legal assistance. It's purely for the purpose of disseminating information. Now, would you just care to expand on that in your own words so that everybody knows exactly what we're doing today, please, Anita?
Well, what we're going to talk about is experiences that don't come up very often for most lawyers, but the unique experience of working with someone who is disabled or having disability as an issue in your divorce case.
Excellent. Thank you for making that quite clear. So, tell us a little bit about your company, Schiller DuCanto and Fleck LLP, the people who you work with, and the kinds of situations that they find themselves in when they come to you for your help.
Schiller DuCanto and Fleck LLP is the nation and perhaps the world's largest, in terms of number of attorneys, law firm that practice exclusively in the area of family law. Family law is divorces, it is prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, it's litigation over child custody between unmarried parents. Sometimes it is dealing with family law issues in a probate or estate planning context. The people that our firm serves generally tend to be people with high net worths, very unique legal problems, or people who just want to dedicate the best possible legal resources to their family law problem. It's a little bit like buying a car. If what you want is basic transportation, you're buying a car that's less expensive. But when there's a lot at stake, people are prepared to invest for the possibility of a better product and a better return. One of the things our firm prides itself on is not treating cases like cookie cutter cases. Every case, every client, they're individuals.
Okay then, Anita, so we're talking about disability and divorce. What would be the advantages of actually being aware of that? Because it's not something that you hear people talking about on a regular basis. So what are the advantages of being aware of disability and divorce?
Well, sometimes areas of law intersect, Stuart, and an example of that is someone who becomes disabled because of a car accident. They may have a lawsuit to recover money against the person who struck them with the car. How that recovery gets treated once you get into divorce court isn't necessarily something that is straightforward. So sometimes when I'm trying to explain things with clients, whether it's estate planning, a personal injury lawsuit, or something else, putting it into the world of divorce where you have two different bodies of law operating can be a little like a harmful drug interaction that you would want to avoid, or at least know how things work so that by making a claim in one area, you aren't foregoing a claim in another area.
So, Anita, both you and I know there's lots of information out there, and especially online. And if anybody wants to find out anything about any kind of topic, for example, disability in divorce, they can go online, they can research, they can ask friends, colleagues, people at work, etc., and they can come up with their own conclusions. However, quite often it could be, and that's just something that I'm asking you, it could be quite often that those conclusions are not really accurate. So in terms of our topic today, disability and divorce, what are some of the biggest myths out there that you come across on a regular basis?
I think one of the biggest myths is that people make the assumption that if someone has a disability, they're somehow inferior as a parent. If you look in the part of our Divorce Act that talks about courts making decisions about parenting allocation, and even in the Uniform Custody Acts that are out there that all the states work off of to create their laws, what they talk in terms of is both parents' and children's mental and physical health. All right? Physical health can be high blood pressure. Physical health can be an addiction. Physical health can be a disability. So you don't see the word disability embedded in the statutes. What you do see is courts directed to consider mental and physical health. And a big misconception is, oh, my spouse is disabled, therefore I'm going to have the kids living with me. That's one big misconception.
Mm-hmm. Please share another one, please. Go ahead.
I would say another big misconception is people get familiar with a point of law, for example, that the proceeds from a personal injury lawsuit are marital property, which is subject to being divided as part of a divorce. So someone's spouse gets an injury recovery for an injury that took place during their marriage, and they automatically think they're going to get half of it. That's a misconception, because the recovery being part of what a divorce court considers and divides is only the start. There are factors that can influence how that property gets divided as between the disabled individual and the other individual in the case.
So, Anita, as I alluded to before, you don't hear people talking about disability and divorce on a regular basis. So, with that said, what are some of your clients' most common fears about today's topic of disability in divorce?
I think the most common fears are a little in line with the most common fears in just about any divorce or court situation that touches a family. The unknowns, the uncertains. I'm disabled. Does that mean I'm never going to be able to be with my kids without paying a large amount of money to have a supervisor with me? Are my kids, if I, for example, represent the individual who's not disabled, are my children going to be safe and okay with the disabled parent? I think those are the most, common fears. Dividing up our estate. Am I going to be able to live? Am I going to be able to have the means and the resources financially to take care of myself? Those are the most common fears.
So how can people actually get past those fears then, Anita? What do you recommend?
Well, one of the things, in terms of the fears, one of the things that with children, I guess anecdotally, I got involved in a case with someone who was disabled, quadriplegic, and when I got involved with the case, on the first day I went into court, someone who did a lot of custody work, who's appointed many times to represent kids in divorces, he saw me opening the door for my client in her electric wheelchair. And as she passed, he was holding the door for me, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, Anita, I'm sorry. You have the bad side of that case." And I looked back at him, and this was after knowing the client for a bit of time. I said, that's just you looking at the wheelchair. She can parent circles around her husband. Parenting isn't about the physical. Parenting is a whole lot more than the physical. I said, she doesn't need arms and legs to be a better parent than he is. But what that did for me, he did me the biggest favor, because he raised my consciousness to the fact that everybody in the world doesn't believe that when you have challenges, you can do things to meet the challenges and be just as good or better a parent than the other individual. Frankly, it's easier to advance someone's cause in a parenting case when they are emotionally and mentally good parents as opposed to arms and legs. Arms and legs can be replaced by caregivers and assistants. But if somebody has no parenting judgment, there's nothing you can do to give it to them.
These are some great insights that you're sharing with us so far, Anita, and it's going to be very useful for the listeners out there. And I'm sure, hope that we're doing our part in raising awareness about this particular topic, because as we said before, this is not something you hear spoken about quite often. So with that said, Anita, what other perceived obstacles do you see that might be preventing people from seeking the help of a family law attorney like yourself?
I think the biggest obstacles to seeking help are people just thinking that if they have a disability, it's a done deal. Maybe they shouldn't fight about what goes on in court because they have no chance of winning. And I think there's a learning curve in the court system that's going on now. When I talk to sitting judges at times, they're making observations about seeing more and more individuals before them dealing with custody cases and substance abuse. Things that didn't used to see the public light of day are now really out there, and judges are having to deal with them. So I think people presuming outcomes is the biggest obstacle to people getting the information. Some people think that when you go to see a divorce lawyer, walking in the door is a commitment to divorce, and it really isn't. It's seeking advice. It's just like if somebody goes to the doctor because their leg is hurting, the doctor might give them a surgical option. Just because the doctor lays out the surgical option doesn't mean they have to take it. And it's the same with any advice a divorce lawyer gives you. They can come up with a dozen different plans, if they're good ones, and you can choose the plan that suits your level of risk tolerance. You can choose the plan that suits your budget and your resource level.
Now, Anita, obviously keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, could you just please sum up an example of how you've been able to help someone to succeed in getting the results that they wanted when they initially came to you for your help?
Sure. What we did, in particular in this most recent case, where I don't know if I'm spoiling things, but the end of the story is our client, who was a quadriplegic, ended up with sole custody of her 4 special needs children. And she ended up with that custody not because anybody pulled a rabbit out of a hat. She ended up with that custody because she and her family members that she was living with really did present the best team for caring for these children, the best coping skills for dealing with the children's issues, and the best environment for the children. So what did we do? Well, we gather evidence. We ended up taking depositions, which are question and answer sessions where someone takes everything down. We took depositions of all the people at all of the places where the children had activities, got information from schools, pulled together all the anecdotal information about who was doing what relative to the children. And they did reveal some shortcomings in the children's father. And ultimately, when all of that information went to a court-appointed evaluator, the court-appointed evaluator ended up making a finding that the children should be living with their mother. Now, what was interesting about the case, and this is, I suppose, a place to give a little caution, the father didn't like what the court-appointed custody evaluator said. So he decided to change attorneys, and his new attorneys went into court and asked to have another evaluation by someone that they would hire. That someone, in the end, never wrote a report because that expert, people in mental health disciplines, even if they're your hired gun, they don't have a duty to find what you want. They have a duty to do a faithful and impartial investigation. And when this gentleman's own expert couldn't, in good conscience, say the children should live with him. So they didn't do a report. And we brought that individual in for a deposition and got out her own views, his own expert's views, that the children should not be living with him. So building a case where mental health experts find that the disabled individual has the better ability to parent, notwithstanding their disability, is the way to move ahead with these things in court. Now, stepping back and looking at the other side of things, we as lawyers are lawyers. There are some lawyers who may, out of the best of intentions, try to help their client be a better parent. but you really can't change who people are. So as much as the father's lawyers in this instance really tried to almost parent for him, it couldn't conceal the judgment deficits and the parenting deficits that the experts were seeing. So recognizing that all parenting experts, whether they're your hired gun or whether they're not, have a duty to stay true to the principles of their discipline is an important thing to know. People should think twice when you've had an impartial court-appointed expert make findings. It should really be a thoughtful, studied decision as to whether you're going to bring in other experts, which prolongs the case and adds to the cost of the case. Sometimes there's a reason for doing it. Sometimes even the best of experts can miss the mark. But you really have to think twice before bringing in expert number 2 or expert number 3.
As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is family law attorney Anita M. Ventrelli, and her topic for today is disability in divorce. Now, with that in mind, and for those people who are listening right now, and especially those people who may have disabilities, Anita, what are some of the unknown pitfalls or even some of the common mistakes that they need to keep in mind, irrespective of what kind of situation they find themselves in?
I think the common pitfalls for anyone who's disabled are much the same as for anyone who's not disabled. Most people's biggest mistake when working with a divorce lawyer is that they don't tell their divorce lawyer everything. They don't tell their divorce lawyer what their worst fears are. I start out consultations asking people, what's your spouse going to say about you? What things about you are you most afraid of coming to light in the case? Many times when a lawyer knows these things on the front end, the lawyer can dispel misconceptions. The lawyer can make suggestions about different or better ways to do things. But if you don't talk to your lawyer and really treat them like the trusted advisor that they should be, you won't get the maximum benefit from their legal advice. Something else, and this now I'm going to kind of segue over into the financial pieces of things. Most of the time when people get either court verdicts or settlements for injuries, those settlements flow from having what people will call a life care plan. There are experts in the field who will go out and figure out what the medical expenses, additional equipment, caregivers will cost somebody that is disabled or injured. Now, those life care plans are great for the medical and caregiver medicine and equipment expenses. But what they don't factor in at all is the cost of people putting groceries on the table, paying for their children's school registrations, college educations, and things of that nature. So, if somebody were married, became disabled, and was going to be having a lawsuit to deal with what happens next, something that they should give attention to is whether or not within that personal injury suit they can recover for lost wages, whether they can get anything to help with family expenses other than the medical expenses. Now, not everybody can make a settlement because, just like divorce cases they don't give us a cookbook where we can plug in all the ingredients and come to the one right outcome. Personal injury settlements are the same way. Sometimes the recovery isn't certain, even if you're certain someone made a mistake. So people's settlements don't always reflect what it's going to cost them to take care of themselves for the rest of their lives and to take care of their family. Something that in the particular case I dealt with, and it's in the public court file, is that in the personal injury proceedings that led to my client's settlement, they hired one of these life care plan experts. And it was a joint engagement. The husband and the wife, before the divorce, prosecuted this litigation to get a recovery for what was done wrong. This happened to be a medical malpractice situation. So both the husband and the wife were effectively signing on to what the life care plan expert concluded because they both used it to achieve the settlement that they got. When the time came to deal with the divorce suit, the husband decided that he was going to try to say that the life care plan expert numbers that came out of the personal injury case were way too high. She doesn't need this much to take care of herself. So the judge in the case ultimately didn't take kindly to the fact that when the numbers worked for this gentleman to try to get a part of the personal injury recovery, he was all for them, but then he stepped away from them and tried to argue for different numbers in the divorce case. So be mindful of what you do in your personal injury suit or any litigation where the recovery is something that's going to be looked at in divorce court. You want to be very careful and mindful that the positions you take in that lawsuit are going to be positions that the other side is going to try to hold you to in the divorce case.
Right, so Anita, I just want to circle back to the point where you spoke about sharing as much information as possible with your attorney. Now, let's just imagine there is somebody who feels, do I really have to share everything? I'm quite a private person. Doesn't need to really have to know all of those details. If that's the case then, Anita, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, what could be the repercussions of them doing so, of not giving full disclosure with their attorney? What could actually happen?
Well, Stuart, that's a wonderful question, because people have ideas in their own head. How would anybody find out about this? I'm not going to say it because how would anybody find out about it? Well, things come from the darndest places. One of the things that happens when you deal with custody or parenting allocation issues is that the experts involved talk to your kids.
Right.
And kids don't know.
They don't know, exactly.
Does mommy help you get on the potty? Yes or no? Who helps you brush your teeth? All these questions can end up being an inadvertent reveal to something that the parent didn't disclose. Mom who's in a wheelchair can't help me tie my shoes. Some of them are obvious, but other things are not necessarily so obvious. But whether it's children, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's a family member who isn't part of the legal strategy and doesn't know what's out there and not out there, particularly since so many people live out in social media these days. And one of the things that I think I found, and again, I was flagged early on, first time in the courtroom, and I had somebody suggesting to me that I had the uphill battle on the case. It made me really think about the fact that every judge, every lawyer, they bring their preconceived notions of everything into the courtroom. One of the things that's recently developed, for example, in the Bar Association world, I've been active in the American Bar Association Family Law section since probably 1993, and I currently sit in the House of Delegates. Within the last couple of years, the Commission on Disabilities within the Bar Association, the ABA, has started advancing resolutions to raise consciousness about not treating people with disabilities differently than other litigants, not making them rise to a higher standard. There was one resolution that went through a couple of years back that urged state and local governments to make sure that when deciding custody issues, parents with disabilities were not viewed as automatically flawed or ineligible for their children living with them. I believe it was about last year they did a resolution that dealt with when you have someone who doesn't have the capacity to make their own decisions, having whatever the guardianship is very closely tailored to where their deficit lies, as opposed to simply taking all of their decision-making powers away from them. These are important steps in consciousness raising.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Anita. Now, looking into a little bit of your background before you came onto the show, you've been around for quite some time practicing family law. So when you think back to all of the people who you've helped, all of your clients who you've helped over the years to achieve the transformation that they were looking for, the transformation they were looking for when they reached out to you for your help. Because essentially, even though you're a family law attorney, essentially you're a transformationalist, right? You take people from point A to point B, which is their desired outcome. So when you think about all of those people who you've been able to help, on a deep down personal level then, Anita, what does that give you? What do you actually get from that? How does it make you feel?
I think the thing that keeps those of us who do this work for any length of time going is when you hear from somebody that you've helped years later about where they are. Every year there are a couple of clients that still send me Christmas cards and pictures of their families. There are some that I still see socially. In fact, one of my dearest friends in the whole world is somebody whose divorce I helped participate in. But I think the biggest kick for me personally is when someone comes in and they think that the only way they can get through to the other side is to have a lot of contested litigation. There have been a couple of those cases that make me smile every time I think about them, because we found a way for me to never really be known to the other side. We found a way for them to talk to the person on the other side, to reason with them, to use logic, and to play off of a desire to preserve their wealth, to come up with a settlement without ever walking into a courtroom. The first time the other side knew I was around was when we were drafting up an agreement. And to be able to do that for somebody who thought they had absolutely no hope of getting free of an abusive spouse, nothing feels better.
Right. You know, Anita, you sound so good at your job. I think I'm going to file for divorce just so I can be your client and you can look after my concerns. How does that sound?
You know, I don't know that the cost benefit is there.
But no, seriously though, I can just feel that your genuine passion for what you do, and just based on the information that you shared so far, one can tell that you really revel in your profession and in helping people to create that transformation that they were looking for when they initially reached out to you. So thank you so much for sharing all of these fantastic insights so far. So we've kind of reached a point now, Anita, where I'd just like you to share something about yourself. Please tell us a little bit about your backstory. What inspired you to become a family law attorney? Because, you know, you and I both know it's never a straight line. You never just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a family law attorney. It's always a long, meandering path to where one finds themselves today. So what's your story then, Anita? What inspired you to become a family law attorney?
I guess I'll say it this way, Stuart. I ended up where I am purely by accident. For me, it turned out to be a happy accident, but I am an adult child of divorce. And when my parents were going through their divorce, my father needed help gathering financial records. And because I very badly wanted both of my parents to get through their divorce so that they could each start healing, I ended up helping my father gather records, and I had interactions with someone who's now one of my partners in the doing of it. And that gentleman, after I brought in my dad's last homework project, said, you know, you're really good at this. Have you ever thought about doing this kind of work? And I really hadn't thought about doing that kind of work, but I interviewed with the firm with a most wonderful, wonderful woman, Saran Seaworth. She was the best research and appeals lawyer I know. And I was privileged to be hired as a law clerk in this firm back in 1988. And after that, I was luckier still in that I got to work with Donald Schiller, Arnold Stein, Jim O'Brien very closely. And those three lawyers really shaped who I am as a lawyer. Love of law, love of doing good for people, and love of not backing away from a challenge were the gifts they gave to me. So that's how I really stumbled into what I do now. But when people ask why I like the area I'm in, it's one of the few areas of law that contains a very human element. You get to deal with people. Courtroom work, which some people feel like they're missing out on something in their legal career if they don't go to court. And you have to know so many different subject areas. You get to know so many different subject areas. If the estate involves a real estate empire, then you get to learn how real estate empires work. If it involves a private equity company, you get to learn how those work. If it's a dental practice, you learn how to master those things. So you really learn to take pride in being able to master anything that comes down the pike when you do this kind of work.
for those people who may find themselves at conflict with their partners, and they may rightly feel very angry, they may have every right to feel so. However, if there are children involved, then we should be looking at things differently. What would you just like to share? And obviously, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a legal advice, what Anita is going to share with you, but what would you like to voice to those people out there who may find themselves in that position where there's lots of conflict and there are children involved?
Thing number one, your children see and hear far more than you think they see and hear.
Hello, exactly.
I learn all the time.
Yeah.
I learn all the time that from the custody evaluator, yeah, the kids really did hear that argument. The kids really did hear mom or dad talking to their friend in negative terms about the other parent. The first warning sign, though, that you and your spouse are destroying your children is when you find that your children are anxious about you and are you okay, and they're looking to take care of you. Children shouldn't have to take care of their parents. So when you, as an adult, are looking for emotional comfort, don't use your child. Making your child your primary intimate is the worst thing you can do for that child. They're not emotionally equipped for it. This is sort of an aside, but I think that, now we're seeing more and more children, school-age children with anxieties that we never had when we were children. I'm 54, Stuart, so you and I aren't that far apart in age. Our parents shielded us and protected us. We didn't have anywhere near the access to media that children these days have. The more children know about the danger in the world, the more anxious they're going to be. Baby horses and cows come out of the womb and they're already walking. Human children don't do that. Human children need the shelter of parents who are mindful of the limits of what they can cope with, not parents who are interested in fighting a war. I mean, custody fights sometimes have to happen because people just can't get it together, but they're universally not good for children. So sometimes you can win the battle but lose the war. And more, there are alternatives out there for parents. There are mediators who will work just with the two parents. There are other mediators that work with parents and the parents' attorneys, so that's called attorney-assisted mediation. There is the collaborative law field. More and more judges are assigning things to mediation, even on the financial issues, because they realize how destructive that the court fighting is to a family. So as long as people can cognitively process things and try to be forward-looking as opposed to backward-looking, divorce, there's a reason we have no-fault divorce in a lot of states in America. It's because judges aren't there to decide who did wrong. They're just there to unwind the whole thing and to unwind it in a way where everyone will be financially cared for and nobody will be ending up on welfare. So people who go into divorce situations thinking that, the judge's main focus is to say, I'm going to punish you because you had an affair. I'm going to punish you because you didn't do the dishes every night. I'm going to punish you because you were out of work for 6 years. It's not what the judges are there to do.
So, Anita, looking back on your career, can you share a lesson that you learned early on that still influences how you do business today?
Sure, Stuart. I think the lesson I learned earliest on is that sometimes the best legal result can't be measured in dollars and cents. Sometimes the best legal result is something that brings an intangible quality to someone's life. Some people feel like they have to go into court and seek to give the least amount of money or get the most amount of money. And if the lawyers view things that way, they may not be listening to what their client really wants. So listening to what somebody really wants to do and making it okay for them to do what they really want to do, even if they're giving more or taking less than what a judge might order. It's an intuitive thing that the really good lawyers strive for. What's going to make this person feel good when they're all said and done? Because maybe it's not dollars and cents. Sometimes it is, but not always.
So, Anita, with that in mind then, what's the most important question that people should ask themselves while they're thinking about disability and divorce?
I think at that particular stage, the most important question to ask themselves is, with respect to their children, If my spouse just disappeared off the face of the earth tomorrow, what would I do to make sure that my children get the same kind of care that they got from the two of us as a unit? In other words, how would I replace my husband or wife's skills with our children? That will help you plan. On the dollars and cents side, you have to ask yourself, what kind of a living situation do I need to put myself in to be all right? For example, you hear stories, oftentimes more than you'd like, about people who rely entirely on paid caregivers in their homes. Some people have great paid caregivers, and other people have paid caregivers that take advantage, financially or otherwise. So you want to look at creating the best possible environment for your own care as well as the care of your children. My client was incredibly fortunate because her sister and brother-in-law would not even remotely hear of her setting herself up in her own household with paid caregivers to rely on entirely. Mm. She ended up living in their home. They outfitted their home to be a place where she and her 4 children could live with them.
So, Anita, before we wrap things up with our last question for today and find out how people can reach out to you, what's the most important thing that people should consider when evaluating a family law attorney like yourself?
I think they should evaluate the lawyer's listening ability. I think they should ask the lawyer a lot of questions about how the lawyer communicates. And I think they should tell the lawyer what they fear the most and see how the lawyer reacts to it. If the lawyer reacts in a way that gives them comfort, then you've probably got a good fit. It's really a lot like finding a doctor. You're going to somebody at a horrible time in your life. You're not at your best in terms of where your life stands, and you need help. You want to find somebody that's going to be a good fit for what you need. Somebody you can trust.
So share with us some quick fire bullet point questions that they could ask, especially with reference to what you said, ask them questions about how they communicate. What kind of questions could they ask? Just some real quick fire bullet points, please. Go ahead.
What should I expect to hear from you after you do a court appearance?
Okay.
When something comes up at home, how should I communicate with you about it? When something comes up at home on the weekend, how do I reach you?
And just one more.
What kinds of things are all right to do financially without having a strategy talk? You know, people get friends and relatives whispering in their ear, oh yeah, you're getting divorced, stop putting your paycheck in the bank account. Sometimes the biggest embroglios that people end up in are because of things they do without talking to their lawyer. So I guess the big bullet is, if you're even remotely thinking, should I do this or shouldn't I do this, talk to the lawyer before you do it. But, you know, asking the lawyers, what's my role in analyzing the financial information? Who am I going to work with? Am I going to work with you? Am I going to work with other lawyers in your firm? Am I going to work with paralegals in your firm? Setting expectations kind of questions.
And all the time while asking those questions, just obviously listening to the answers, but watching the cues and listening to your own gut feeling if this is the right person for you, right?
Yes. I mean, if you're sitting and talking to a lawyer and let's say you feel more comforted by talking on the telephone, if that lawyer is telling you that their favorite way of communicating is by email or text message, maybe that's not the lawyer for you. Mm-hmm. The best lawyers are chameleons. They're people who can adapt their own personal style to what's going to make a client who's in an otherwise stressful situation feel more comfortable.
So, Anita, it's been a fantastic conversation with you today. If there is somebody out there, even after listening to so many great insights, who still feels that they need to know more about disability in divorce, what would be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with us is to either use our website, which is sdflaw.com, or to call 312-609-5509.
You've given out your contact details, phone number, you sent people to the website, but what will actually happen when they do get in touch with you? Because I always find that, when a company says, yes, get in touch with us for a free consultation or go to the website and download this report, etc., I always think, well, what's actually going to happen when I do reach out? What's behind that call to action? So please let's just squash any kind of reservation that somebody may have of picking up the phone and giving you a call because they just don't want to be hard sold or hit over the head with a Fred Flintstone club and dragged to the back of the office and have their purse emptied, right? So just please paint the picture for them of what your process is once they reach out to you.
Well, that's a very good question, Stuart. One of the things that our firm does not offer free consultations. The reason we don't offer free consultations is we take our consultations very seriously. We analyze things, we look at things, and people don't walk out of our offices without a plan or multiple plans and alternatives for going forward. So there's value in the consultation. And there are some people out there who consult with multiple lawyers and they're not really serious about doing it. So when someone gets in touch with us about consulting, because it doesn't have to turn into a court case, the first thing they're going to be asked is the name of the person on the other side of the case so that we can run a conflict of interest check. If there are no conflicts of interest, then the assistant that they speak with is going to give them chapter and verse on the hourly rate of the individual that they'll be consulting with and set up an appointment. Now, when people are physically and geographically nearby, meeting face-to-face is the best way to get the advice because while you have a very expressive telephone voice, not everyone does. It's hard sometimes to make a connection over the phone. That said, one of the things that, in particular in my case with my client who was disabled, as soon as my assistant heard that she was in a wheelchair, my assistant told them that I would be coming to them as opposed to them coming to me. Mm-hmm. When it comes to people who are operating long distance, sometimes we do the consultation by telephone, sometimes we do it by FaceTime or Skype or other electronic means so that we can actually see each other. So telephone call, conflicts list screening, discussion of the hourly rates that would be billed for the consultation, and then having the consultation. And consultations don't mean a commitment to doing anything in particular. There are a lot of people who come in to get educated on possibilities, and some people it takes them years to take action or they never take action. But they feel good about not taking the action because they've been informed about where it might get them.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our interview today with family law attorney Anita M. Ventrelli. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Anita. You have certainly demonstrated that you are a true educator, advocate, and most certainly a trustworthy, helpful advisor for your client's success. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Stuart. It was a pleasure.
You are so welcome, my dear. And I'd also like to take a moment to say a big thank you to you. Yes, our listener. Without you, we wouldn't have anybody to speak to. So, we'd be sat here twiddling our thumbs. So thank you also for taking the time out of your busy day to come and join us on what I can only describe as a very insightful and informative discussion with one of the top family law attorneys in the Chicago, Illinois area. Again, her name is Anita M. Ventrelli. Make sure you do check her out, give her a call. She shared her phone number and visit her website. There are some fantastic resources on there. Whatever you do decide to do after listening to Anita today, I am absolutely sure that you're going to be in good hands. So that's it for today, folks. Again, my name is Stuart Andrew Alexander. We will be back shortly with some more top divorce professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present, and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.